Hello, everybody. It is Italy week. It is time to turn the page on that Paris result. Welcome to the Left Wing Podcast. Will Slattery here with you. Delighted to be joined for our chat tonight by Luke Fitzgerald. Luke, how are you?
I'm good, Will. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Luke. Good to have you back with us. A reminder that our rugby coverage on the Left Wing Podcast is sponsored by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the Energia AIL, and as official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. I'm also delighted to be joined this week by our good friend Jonathan Bradley. Jonathan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Much better than the week has been in Irish rugby.
Yeah. Before we move forward, just to get your own thoughts on last Thursday night in Paris. Obviously, we haven't chatted to you since then. Myself and Luke chatted on Friday about it. France 36, Ireland 14. You know, with a couple of, whatever, 4 or 5 days now to kind of think through how the game played out. Like, what was your kind of big takeaway from it?
I suppose my main takeaway was just that it was, I would say, pretty much as bad as people were expecting, but the real jarring thing was the way in which it was bad. You know, we came into that game worried about the scrum. We came into that game worried about, I suppose, the test and depth through the players that were injured. And we didn't really see any of the things that we were worried about play out because Ireland were almost a level below getting to that point. Like, when Andy Farrell came out and spoke about the lack of intent, he was really speaking about, the lack of doing the basics. So I think it's been a long time since we've seen an Ireland team really fail in so many fundamentals of the game that it meant the rest of it, everything else that we were looking to see in that game, everything else that we were sort of flagging as plot lines in the game never came to pass because Ireland never got to the level required for that to be the case.
So Ireland were so far off that some of the pre-match talking points were rendered moot. That's your verdict.
Yeah, essentially, the scrum, yes, it held up, but everyone thought the scrum was going to be this deciding factor. Like, Ireland won this first scrum penalty of the game. It was in the 45th minute, but it was the first time France had given away a penalty. That's how little pressure France were under. So to me, all those things we were looking out for became not irrelevant, but they just became so secondary to an Ireland team that just looked so off colour and so devoid of confidence or devoid of, I suppose, certainty in what they were trying to do or being asked to do, that it just became such a muddled performance and gave the impression of a team that's just muddled in their direction.
What's interesting there as we turn kind of our thoughts towards Italy, I do want to get your guys' opinions on Andy Farrell's post-match comments, and then we're also going to hear from Eddie O'Sullivan, who was on with Joe on the Indo Sport podcast today, kind of Eddie raising a few issues he had with how Andy Farrell characterised the Irish performance. So we'll hear those clips back to back. First, Andy Farrell speaking to ITV after the match last Thursday, and then Eddie O'Sullivan speaking to Joe earlier.
Yeah, obviously very disappointed through something that I never thought we'd be saying about this Irish team, with a little bit of lack of intent in that first half and, missed tackles or winning the scraps on the floor or winning the fight in the air. It's just intention, and if that's lacking, you're not going to win in any international game, never mind one in Paris.
It's a kind of an abdication in some ways that, I don't know what happened here, but I didn't have anything to do with it. Like, these lads just didn't show up for me. And I thought it was a strange message to send out first game of the championship. So I wonder what the players make of that. So I have to say, I'm still kind of trying to process it because I'm trying to find a way where there was an upside to throwing that out there. I mean, we did play badly, no question. But was the perfect game plan they had put together on offense and defense? Had we the perfect selection? What was our execution like? There was none of that. It was just this is just really, guys didn't show up tonight. And I think, how can you say that? These are full-time professionals, highly paid. They've had the best preparation, been in camp. And the last piece of jigsaw is they don't show up. I mean, I just thought that was crazy.
Jonathan, I thought it was an interesting slant on Andy Farrell's comments, which obviously people poured over after the game, and it was often used, but not necessarily to single out Farrell. And for his words, it was more like I think a lot of people agreed that maybe in the first half Ireland were way off it. But then the way Eddie characterised it then did get me kind of thinking about it. Like, the way Andy Farrell, he's obviously not backing away from it, but he puts the game plan together, he selects the team. Like, what do you make of about the comments and maybe Eddie's point about, like, should Andy really be saying that? Should he be taking a bit of responsibility himself?
I think that was probably the line that was missing, and that was the line that, whether it's in the heat of the moment or whether it was conscious, I think Andy Farrell probably, if he had been asked about that today, he may well have said, and that's on me, but he didn't. And I think that's something that really asks questions about the preparation of this Ireland team, not just coming into this tournament, but in general. Like, Ireland do the same thing before every block now. They go and they do this Portugal camp, and they'll do media during the camp, and everyone will say the preparations are great, everything's going well, we've couldn't be better prepared. And then they go out and then they start the window flats. Like, they were bad against the All Blacks in November. They were bad to start the previous November against the All Blacks, and they weren't particularly good to start last Six Nations. Like, they came through, if you remember that England game, whenever the bench came on, and the bench added real impetus, not unlike against France on Thursday, but obviously in a much better scenario whenever they were coming on. But Ireland have become really slow starters in windows. So I think we're now at the point where you have to question the preparation going into test windows, and you have to question the decisions being made around that. And those decisions are obviously ultimately made by Andy Farrell. So I don't think Farrell himself would view himself as apart from that. I don't think he would separate himself and wash his hands of it all and say that's on the players, because he's a smart enough coach and a good enough coach to know that that's a huge part of his job, getting the players ready to play. So if they're consistently coming into test windows looking like they're not ready to play, then something's obviously going wrong.
Yeah, what's your view on it? Like, because I agree with Jonathan. Like, Andy Farrell has to get the players prepared. He has to get them to the pitch. Well, if I say, firstly, do you agree that they lacked intent? Because, you know, you touched on it in your answer there. Like, for me, when I looked at the first half, you know, you mentioned some defensive issues. Potentially that is an intent piece to it. But say the kick chase, which was a huge part of that first half and which changed France got from it. Like, they didn't look organised there. For me, that comes to, like, a drilling and a coaching issue. Like, when the ball was breaking, there was often like 4 or 5 French shirts around it, and maybe one Irish guy going for maybe 2, but it didn't look anywhere near as coordinated as France's efforts to regain the ball. So, like, I don't know if do you agree with him in the first instance, actually, before we get into what he said?
I thought there wasn't a kick where we were kind of competing that I thought, like, Gibson Park has done that quickly, so no one's prepared. You know, there's not a line behind. You know, there's not people on their feet. He had nice position, so he wasn't getting blocked down. As in the French guy, you know, he was able to lengthen the ruck to get nice kicks away. To me, that buys you time, and there wasn't like a pile of bodies in the rucks. To me, like, you know, he wasn't kicking at bad times. You know, you'd say, you know, if there's a pile of bodies in there, like, it's got to go off the pitch because you haven't got enough bodies on feet. But I didn't think that. So to me, that does signal intent. And to me, that's kind of a player issue. You know, I mean, like, you never leave, you know, a chaser on their own. Like, that's just basic kind of hunger and desire to me. And maybe they didn't focus on it. Maybe they didn't say, like, you know, because to me, when you see those conditions, you're kind of saying, as a winger, I know myself, I'm thinking, right, big day for me today. Like, I've got to get some ball back. I've got to get some pay in the air. I've got to hit guys behind the line. I've got to be buying guys behind me some time and making it messy for the opposition today. And I would expect that everyone is chasing as hard as they can behind me in an organised line to pick up any kind of good work that I've done, whether it's me taking a ball and making sure we win the ruck, or if there's scraps and you get down on it. So to me, that's like you know, our guys switched on. Do they know that it's time to work now? It's still time. You know, it's not over. Like, there's not only one guy working here. You know, you never get to stop working on an international rugby pitch, particularly against the French. So yeah, I mean, look, it's to talk about just in terms of Eddie's comments. You know, I'm a massive respect for Eddie. Very, very astute coach. I think he probably is. I think Jonathan made a good point as well about, like, it was fresh after the match. So sometimes it can be fairly raw, and it's hard to really be coherent and strategic about what you say after the. He
kind of doubled down on it throughout his press dealings. Like, I read the quotes he did with the printer and this as well. He was that was a familiar theme, was the team lacked fight in the first half. The team lacked intent.
But he's part of the team, Will.
But
no.
Oh,
Like, to me,
sorry,
you
he
know,
is part of the team, but
like-
the way he was saying it didn't sound like he meant me and the players. Like it was, like,
Yeah.
because he wasn't on the pitch to lack fight.
Well, look, I think he's got. This is going to be a.
Like he should be saying, I didn't prepare the team well enough.
I
because
don't.
I think intent is such a loaded word because intent implies a lack of desire.
Mm.
And obviously, Luke would know much more about this than me, but I find it very hard to believe that anybody would go out and play international rugby for Ireland with a lack of desire.
But you can.
But I read it more as like a lack of clarity. And I wonder, does that play into what Luke's saying of the lack of focus? Is it not so much a lack of focus on the task at hand, but a lack of focus on what exactly it is they're trying to do? Because to me, it looks like a team that's trying to go away from what they were good at and try and do something different. And they're not executing it well.
Yeah.
And I want, like, Luke again was probably part of an Ireland team that probably never an Ireland team that had greater clarity over what they were meant to be doing than Joe Schmidt's Ireland. And I think even though there were peaks and troughs through that reign, and you can probably say the same thing about Farrell during the COVID years, I think this is even more pronounced in those brief periods during this run of what is Irish rugby success. But I don't remember a team during that run that I think looked less sure of what it was that they were being asked to do. And I think that leads into the problems that they're having in attack, where they just look like they lack so much fluidity. I don't know whether it's a lack of confidence in what they're being asked to do, a lack of belief in what they're being asked to do, or just a lack of experience in what they're being asked to do. But the transition, it looks like they're all really struggling with from what they used to be really good at to what they're trying to become now.
And Joe Schmidt was always great at framing that for us. So he would always focus so intensely at the start of the week on getting the organisation done. So like you pretty much, you couldn't forget what you were doing. And he always said that we were doing this so that it would release us from that kind of pressure of thinking on match day. All you had to do was deliver on the effort and on the physicality. And that was a big thing about why he wanted you to kind of so prepared and why he would be testing you all the time. And it was very intense now to get prepared for a Joe Schmidt match. And I think, he would always come back to that point about like what wins test matches, so technique, and violence around kind of the contact areas, and that everything else would look after itself because we were so organised and clear about what we were trying to achieve around the pitch. So maybe there is something like that. Maybe there's a bit of uncertainty about, what they are trying to do when they have the ball, what they're doing in attack or defence. Are they kind of very clear on what they're doing in each situation? So maybe it's a case of, maybe simplifying further, the game plan. I heard Bernard Jackman he had a really good insight into kind of what England are focusing on. They kind of have two key things that they're kind of focusing on.
Kick and chase.
Yeah. No, but there was another part of it as well. But I just thought, I was like, okay, well, that's really easy to remember it there.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're doing in most situations. And I think that the point I'm making is we don't have to copy that, but, at the same time, clarity, gives you the freedom to really to have that intent, I think. So look, I think the one thing I'd say, because I wanted to kind of cover the Eddie point, I know I flipped to Jonathan for a moment there, but the Eddie thing, the pressure is going to come on Farrell now. And I don't know if it's right because he's missing some really key guys. But it's going to be the situation he finds himself in, whether it's right or wrong. Okay, so I think there is, if they ever do listen to any of this stuff, Eddie be a good guy to listen to on that, because I think it's very important now that he's really clear on his messaging, that he doesn't lose the group, and that they remain very, very tight knit. I think it's a tight knit group anyway, but they need to remain tight and on the same page. To me, he should have worded that a little bit better. Can I just finish the point? Just 2 seconds. I think he should. He to me, how you word these things, Will, is not we. Because let's face it, he doesn't have to, abdicate any responsibility. Like, make yourself part of the group. So to me, I would have messaged that and said, look, we're really disappointed with the intent out there. I've got to look at maybe some of my messaging. I've got to talk to not kind of senior leaders in the team and my coaching staff and figure out, what do we get wrong? Is there something we could be doing better here? And to me, that's probably how I would message that. And the messaging for him now is going to be really important, because a top class coach, which he is, things have been going pretty well for a while for him, and this is going to be probably his most difficult period. And I think, managing the pressures and managing the kind of messaging out of the camp, and keeping everyone on side and moving towards the same goal, united, is going to be absolutely key. And I do think to circle back on the key thing for them now, in my opinion, and for the team, is not to overcomplicate. Now is the time to kind of simplify further and make sure everyone's on the exact same page so that they can deliver on that physicality and the intent.
If you're a player, though, and you're listening to that comment, are you saying he's right, or are you saying, geez, I feel like he's throwing us under the bus there? Like, I actually think we lost, but not because of our lack of intent. It was because of various issues around maybe execution and France playing very well, and obviously certain mistakes, individual errors. But to question the team's intent, like if you're in that dressing room, are you pissed off at him for doing that?
No, I think you'd only ever be pissed off with a coach if they kind of singled individuals out. It's the team. Like this guy is top class. Like, he's absolutely top class. And to me, when he's saying something, and it could be raw after the game, so there might be some emotion tied to it, I'd say he's generally right. So I think the guys will probably know that. I think, like, it's very clear. We all watch the game, and we don't watch half as much rugby as these guys. They're going to be in camp watching non-stop video for the next, or for, since the game. Probably they would have. A lot of those guys probably would have watched the game that night. They'd have watched it the next day. They'd have watched it on Monday, and they know what they needed to deliver and what they didn't deliver on. You always know, Will. So I never really have a problem. I think, to me, the key thing is now that they recognise what the faults are. They get some very clear messaging about what they're going to do to fix it, and they just brush that and move on very quickly to Italy, because this is going to be a serious test, I think, in the weekend. I don't think this is going to be, a cakewalk by any measure, and I think they've got to deliver on. We don't want to be coming out of this match on the weekend not knowing what Ireland are trying to achieve on both sides of the ball, and we absolutely do not want to be questioning any intent in the weekend. They've got to do, and the one thing I would say as well, the penalties. That was a good result. They had one sloppy one with McCarthy, but for the most part they were pretty good even though they were under a lot of pressure, and that was a good positive as well. We probably should mention. So they need to keep that going while having that intent.
Just to keep on that intent thing for a little while longer, Jonathan, like, because say like Andy Farrell mentioned the scraps, not winning the scraps, and how that was indicative of the lack of intent, whereas like, when I was looking at it, the reason they weren't winning the scraps was they didn't have enough men around the ball. But is that because there was a lack of intent and desire to get men around the ball? Or is it because, the amount they kicked and the tactics they employed, maybe by the end of the championship they'll be a lot more bedded in, and they just weren't as drilled and technically sound in that area to this point? Like England, it's so coordinated. The guys know exactly where they need to be to pick up that breaking ball and what they do with it when they get it. So you could say that's intent, but you could also say, I wonder, like Johnny Sexton mentioned in comments recently, that Ireland are working on this and we'll see the fruits of this kicking game before long. So I wonder if this is a journey they're going on, because you could look at it as intent, but you could also look at it as they aren't as drilled as they should be, which comes to coaching, not intent necessarily.
Yeah, because it is a departure, and I think we've maybe overlooked how big a departure it is from, 2022, 2023. This kicking game is not something that we're used to seeing from Ireland. Like, the Sexton thing is interesting, because if you think back to when Ireland last felt this muddled, like Johnny Sexton was the one put out front and centre to say, essentially, I understand that you don't see it, but it doesn't matter that you don't see it because we see it. And that was the unity of message that was coming out around that time. I don't know if the same sort of message has come out this week about that there is full belief in this change in game plan, as there was, whatever that is, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But I do think there is definitely mileage in the fact that they're doing something that they're not used to. Like, I felt a little bit sorry for Jacob Stockdale, because during the week, after he was selected, Andy Farrell said he's back to doing what he's good at, which is beating people, and that's why he's in the team. Well, we didn't see him get a chance to do that, because really he was just asked to chase kicks. And I suppose, crucially, we spent years up here talking about how wingers especially were going to find it difficult to break into the team because they were doing something completely different at Ulster to what they were being asked to do under Andy Farrell, because Andy Farrell wanted his wings coming off the wing, being busy in play. That was something that really probably impacted Balakoon more than it impacted Stockdale, but Stockdale to a certain extent as well. And then he finally gets back in the team, and all of a sudden Ireland are doing something completely different, and something which is, again, completely alien to what they're doing at Ulster, because Ulster barely kick at all in that way. Like, they certainly don't kick contestables. They're not asking them just to chase back and forward. So, it's a departure from what they have been doing for years as the test team, but it's also a departure from what the players are being asked to do week to week. So that focus and that change of focus, I imagine, is something that is particularly difficult to pick up. And look, it will be 1,000 times more difficult and look 1,000 times worse whenever you're doing it against a team like France, who, let's be honest, also just have better athletes.
Yeah, the one thing I'd say on that is, though, like the conditions were pretty poor, you know, so there was always going to be more kicking. I'm not sure that that's going to be the tactic, you know, non-stop for this Irish team. I think that probably was, okay, well, like, you know, you have to adapt to those conditions. To me, that was a sensible. I didn't have a problem with the tactics. I just had a problem with the execution, you know, in terms of the kick chase. They looked like they were well prepared to me in terms of, as I said, when they kicked.
Well, they kicked well. Like the actual kicking, I thought was really
good. The kicks
were
good, but didn't look to me like they didn't have enough bodies to get around the ball. Like, you want to get around the ball in those situations anyway. You know, particularly if you're kicking to Bielbarré, like, get around, you know, get around him. If that fall, if he catches,
so you thought they had enough men? Because I didn't.
No, they didn't get enough men.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I thought they had enough men when they kick. So I'm talking about from the ruck.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I was wondering what the confusion was there. Sorry, I'm talking about when, but maybe the listeners don't. If you didn't as well, maybe I didn't explain it right. You know, when Gibson Park is taking those kicks, you know, were there enough bodies on feet to chase the ball and support our wingers if there was a broken ball, or if, for example, Bielbarré catches a clean one or Ramos catches a clean one, and they go and you know, the winger misses it, and all of a sudden it's counter-attack time. To me, it didn't feel like the guys behind were supporting well enough, and there was enough bodies on feet to support it. So
it comes back to, is that desire? Or is that
I think
drilling the team? So yeah,
I think it's evidence of a little bit of both. Maybe that, you know, they didn't tell them, lads, this is going to be messy. You need to be right up there with the wingers to support them to get any breaking ball or to snuff out any kind of counter-attacking opportunities. And yeah, it could be a little bit of both. Yeah. But I'm leaning more towards they were organised. There weren't rash kicks. The kicks were good. They were contestable. Where was everyone else? You know.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to see. Like, obviously, say Italy is the assignment this weekend. Will they? You know, traditionally they would. You know, you wouldn't think they would need to resort to that to break Italy down. Obviously, traditionally, but you know, what's your view going into this game? Like Italy, like a great win at the weekend. Like Gonzalo Casada, what a job he's done. 4 wins out of his 11 Six Nations games. Italy had only won one of the previous 42 games before he had taken over in the Six Nations. So what? Like, and one of those games he had was a draw against France when the ball fell off the tee, and they should have actually got another crack at it. So that could well have been 5 wins, including a famous away scalp in France if the rub of the green had gone their way. One thing though to flag is their record in the Aviva is so bad. Like these are the last 7 score lines in the Six Nations in the Aviva: 42-10, 46-7, 58-15, 56-19, 50-17, 57-6, and 36-0. That's Italy's last 14 years coming to the Aviva Stadium. But there is a sense that Italy have improved a lot. Ireland are in flux. That it could be kind of a. Like, I expect Ireland to win for sure, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a bit scrappy from what I've seen from this Ireland team, and they might find it tough to kind of put up a scoreline akin to these ones.
Well, they want to make sure they catch the ball and hang on to it in contact, you know, because there's no point. Like, we don't really know what the attacking plan was against France, because they never really got to show it except for a period in the second half. And they looked pretty good when they did get some. When they were violent in the collisions and they hung onto the ball and they rucked well. You know, there's threat in the Irish backline. There's threat amongst. We've got some forwards who can, you know, get gain lines. You can see what Sheehan can do in the loose. Doris when he's, you know, on form. Even McCarthy. There's plenty of threat in this Irish team. Stockdale, we never got to see, of course, and Osborne and O'Brien. So to me, there's loads of threat there. But you got to put yourself in the position to do that by executing on the basics. So, you know, we say, do we have to resort to those things? You will have to do that because you'll have to put pressure on them. You can't just go out there and expect to walk through this Italy team. That's
they defended well against Scotland.
They did defend. Now, the conditions were atrocious, right? But
even in the first 15-20 when it wasn't quite as bad.
Yeah, but it was still pretty messy. Look, and look, I think, if the weather ain't improving here that quickly, it doesn't look like so. It's probably going to be wet, but. You know, they need to look after the ball. They need to, you know, you need to be ruthless with teams like this. And to me, you know, exiting properly and putting pressure on the air, which is something we should be really good at, that is a really nice avenue and a good pressure point to put on teams. So we should be using that effectively against them. We shouldn't be afraid of using that tactic. But if we want to, you know, if we want to put a decent score on them and win comfortably, which we should be able to do given the quality on the pitch, got to catch the ball, got to throw good passes, and got to look after it in contact and be really violent at ruck time and in the carry. These guys are not going to lie down. They're going to have a little bit of belief from this Scotland game. We've got to snuff it out quickly by just being so accurate across the park. And I think if they give them simple a simple game plan. I've confidence this team can bounce back and put on a good showing in the Aviva for the supporters.
Yeah. Italy will be Juan Ignacio Brex. He's injured. I think he started 26 Six Nations games in a row, which is very, very impressive. But Capuazzo is back, the Toulouse flyer who missed last weekend. So a boost in that instance. Jonathan, what's your view on kind of Italy's improvement? Like, you know, it's kind of crazy how well Casada has done just to rack up those wins. As I said, like they required, I think it was 55 games to get 4 wins in the prior tenure before he took over. So he's done unbelievably well to kind of get results, which Italy have traditionally really struggled for.
Yeah, I think he's done incredibly. He's really transformed the team. And it's interesting because you remember whenever we first came in, there seemed to be a little bit of skepticism around it. But the results speak for themselves. Like you mentioned, Scotland, obviously, but even like the way they put it up to South Africa. Now, ultimately, they could beat, but the way they put it up to South Africa for a while in November as well, like that's really shows that they have the physicality for the very top teams in international rugby. So I think, like, they've been really impressive. I don't think it's outlandish to suggest that this might be Ireland's third hardest game in the Six Nations. And I think that's how much Italy have come on. And I think that sets a really, really interesting dynamic around this weekend's game. Like you said, obviously, Italy's recent visits to the Aviva have been atrocious. But I mean, Ireland only beat them by 5 in Rome last year. And the way that it feels in terms of the levels of confidence coming in and the levels of, whether it be clarity, whether it be focus, but the contrasting levels of, I suppose, the comfort that these two teams are coming into this game is off the scale.
Yeah, it's funny, since the 2023 World Cup, Italy have the same amount of Six Nations wins as Scotland, which is crazy.
It is crazy, actually, isn't it? Yeah.
It's maybe more about Gregor Townsend and the position he's in potentially, but like it shows how like that Italy are not, like, maybe in our mind's eye we still see them as like, you know, bottom feeders, but their results have actually been, you know, mid-table, which is like for them has been really good.
Yeah, I mean, like they're always pretty difficult at home. You know, you expect a kind of big result out of them there. You mentioned the one against France. That would have been a big scalp for them, I think. And obviously they've got a Wales win as well away, but like they need probably a big scalp away would probably cement it a little bit more for me. You can't just be.
This weekend's a big game for them, like just in terms of
I agree.
Progress. Like I don't expect them to win, but if they even make this a contest, say if it's similar to the game in Rome last year where Ireland get over the line, but it's pretty close, that'd be a huge step forward for them.
I would 100%, and it would give them huge confidence, I think, because Ireland are really difficult to play against at home for most of the time. Even though we're down kind of a significant number of bodies in key positions, I think. Look, to me, it's still a step too far for them. But I think, I agree. I think if they took step forwards, if this was a close match, if this was close into the kind of 70-minute kind of mark or so, that would be a serious result for me. Because I think Ireland will still have too much on the bench for them. I think that'll be a kind of a key part for them. Like if it's tied around 50. And Ireland are bringing on their bench, I expect Ireland to kind of pull away by kind of 2 or 3 tries at that point. I think they'll have too much power for them there. But if they can hang in there to the 70 minute, that tells me they've made some serious progress, I think. And yeah, bonus point to be like a serious result for them. But look, they're still searching for that big scalp, I think. And it feels like this is, even though Ireland are in bad shape, I think Paris, I think I'm expecting a kind of jolt, in physicality and accuracy after the match in Paris. I think that'll really focus the minds, and they'll want to put on a big show.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Ireland bench, let's discuss maybe changes for this weekend. Jonathan, what's your sense of what would you do? Because I would be pretty drastic if I was Andy Farrell this weekend. I think there's a few guys there who aren't. The notion has been to play them into form and maybe get them back to their very best, and we're just not seeing it. Like, I don't think Dan Sheehan is having a good season. I think Tom Stewart has been the best hooker in Ireland this year on club form. Like the robustness he showed, say, when he was throwing James Lowe to the ground 3 times in a row in the Aviva Stadium. That's what we're used to seeing from Dan Sheehan when he's really motoring and really humming. Like I'd like to see Tom Stewart get a shot. I think Joe McCarthy should be dropped for that penalty. I just think a message needs to be sent that level of ill-discipline is not acceptable. Like we touched on this on Friday, myself and Luke. 12 months on from a really bad penalty against France, he gives away a really bad penalty against France. And even though he's a really good player and an integral part of Ireland's team. I think for this weekend, a message should be sent to him. Put him on the bench even and just show him that like he needs to tidy that part of his game up. I'd like to see Timoney in for Van der Fleer potentially. I think Timoney was really powerful off the bench last week. And I'd actually, like, this isn't going to happen, but I think Conan is playing better than Caelan Doris. Like, Caelan Doris is the Ireland captain. He's not going to be dropped. But I think Conan's playing better than him and should be starting at number 8 at the weekend. Like that would obviously be very drastic to drop Sheehan, McCarthy, Van der Fleer and Doris. They've been 4 automatic starters for the last 2 years. But I don't think, McCarthy aside, because that's kind of a discipline issue, I think the other 3 players are struggling for their best form. What's your sense on what you might do this week if you were Andy Farrell?
Yeah, I wrote very similar to what you've said there yesterday. So we're very much on the same page, especially with McCarthy. I don't know where you would stand on who should replace him, but like I think I would bring in a Dogbo. I don't really buy the not across the detail thing, especially on the basis of Thursday, because it didn't really seem like, from what they were doing, and I take Luke's point that maybe it was weather related, but it didn't seem like that should be a particularly difficult game plan to get across, certainly when compared to what Ireland were doing 3 or 4 years ago. And same, I think you have to send a message that that sort of discipline, or ill discipline rather, can't be tolerated. I think Timoney needs to come in. I think Timoney probably, to my mind, highlighted Ireland's selection folly really since the World Cup. You know, you're talking about somebody who has been one of the best players in provincial rugby for a number of years. He's been one of Ulster's 3 best players, realistically, almost every time he plays for years and years and years. We're near 5 years on from his international debut, and that was the first time he was playing in the Six Nations.
He's 30. He turned 30.
Yeah.
That's funny. I was like, Timoney, it'd be good to get some fresh blood in, some fresh ideas. And just look at it. Geez, he's only a few years younger than me. Like, as in, but
like I think he's 31 in April, so like he's nearly 31, really.
Yeah.
And it took that long to give him the chance. And this for me is sort of the main takeaway, not really from just Thursday, but the last, this run of 7 defeats in 9 games against the 4 teams above them in the world rankings, is that for all this hand-wringing about depth, we're never going to know whether players are ready to play those best teams until they do. I think that there's almost zero value in making 13 changes to play Fiji in the middle game in the autumn, or as it used to be, 10 changes to play Italy in the Six Nations. Like, I think you have to expose these guys and you have to widen the player pool. And the reason that you have to do it now, and the reason that I think really does show that it should have been done earlier, really post 2023, is the fact that what were you ever going to do if those players that you relied upon so heavily lost form, which is what's happened? Like, whatever about, the injuries at Loosehead, people are talking about like the injuries sort of being a freak situation, but it's not like Boyle and McCarthy had a rake of caps either. So you were always going to be in a position once Porter got injured that you weren't going to have people who had been exposed to that level of Test rugby. You were always asking people to step up. And I think now that it is beyond clear that this is a team in transition, and a team that is transitioning away, with all due respect, to an incredible crop of players, but they need to prepare for life after them because they've lost form. They're all on the wrong side of 30. I'm not saying that they can't regain form, but you now need to look at what has happened in the last number of years of not having people ready to make that step up, because you're asking them to do something that you've never asked them to do before, which is play, teams that are not, with all due respect, the teams that you play in that middle autumn international or whatever you view as your easiest Six Nations game. You need to be playing them in a game that's high stakes. You need to be playing them in a game that's going to be the physicality of Irish rugby. And I think if the goal is to make, to compete for a World Cup, if the goal is to win Six Nations, if the goal is to win Grand Slams, then you need to start thinking about what's beyond this current team. And that has to start now, because they're not in a position to compete with the best teams in the world as currently constituted.
What's your view on it, Luke? I do think that they could do with a selection jolt this week. Like, having a few of those guys on the bench and kind of sending a message to them that way. Like one of Andy Farrell's kind of the way he kind of G's guys up. Like, instead of trying to play them into form, say, okay, you're not starting this week. The guys who actually finished the game last week, some of them I mentioned there, are coming in and getting a crack from the start, and you have to come in and prove that you still deserve to be in this team, rather than us picking you and saying, "Oh, you're hoping you get to the pitch," because so many of them didn't in Paris. And I think this could actually be beneficial both for the guys on the bench to press their case, but also like having a bench with Dan Sheehan, Joe McCarthy, Van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, like that's serious.
No, it is. Yeah, no, it is. I think. I don't think I'd be as drastic about it. I don't think Sheehan's always in my team. Quality operator. No, not lighting it up, but the team's not lighting up. We haven't had much ball to really just, the things that he's special at is with ball in hand. We had none of it against France. So I think we saw some of that, in some of Leinster's Champions Cup games. You still got that, still got that power and that eye for a gap and a try. So he stays in my team. I think I think McCarthy stays in the team for me, but I think you need to give him a rap on the knuckles in training this week. So you're a lucky boy to be in the team again, but you need to cop your act. You cop yourself on with the kind of loose penalties. And I'd bring Ryan in, and I would put Byrne to 6, and I think Van der Fleer goes to the bench for me. I think that's right. I think I'm unconvinced about what I'd do next. For me, would I like to see Doris maybe at 7? I think I wouldn't mind seeing him have a go there, and I'd put Conan at 8. I think that's a really fearsome pack. There's some serious ball carriers in there. You got the threat on the deck as well. And that's what I do. If you ask me honestly, I thought they probably should have started with something like that against France, although I could see why Van der Fleer's in there and Conan's on the bench. But I agree on the Conan point, by the way. I think he's nearly become too important to not play. I think they kind of judge him off one-off starts sometimes rather than giving him a real block of games. Now, it doesn't help sometimes he gets some injuries. He's had a kind of patchy injury record, although not so much the last couple of years. But when he's had chances, sometimes he hasn't been able to kind of get a real consecutive bunch of games together. But I think he's a top class player. I think he's starting in my team, to be honest with you. I wouldn't just reserve him for the bench.
He's probably the best ball carrier in the team.
I know he is. He's so physical. He's a great tackler too. Conan misses very, very few tackles. You watch his technique. He's got superb technique.
Good over the ball as well.
He's pretty good over the ball, although I wouldn't say that's his biggest strength, to be honest with you. But I think that's probably Doris' biggest strength at the moment. That's probably what I do. Now, that's a big shift around in the pack, but it gives you great weight and power in there. And I just think I would like to see a Dogbo on the bench. I really like to see that. And
what did you make of Farrell's comments on a Dogbo that about he was kind of basically inferring that he wasn't up to speed as yet on the detail in the game plan? Like, is that like a worthy reason for withholding him? Or to Jonathan's point, is it kind of like Jesus? Like, is it too complicated if you can't bring a guy in on the bench who has that much potential and power?
It's a big step up to international. You don't want to sell a guy down the river too early as well. Like, remember, like coming into the first match of the Six Nations, like most of those guys probably are been in camps for long periods of time and stuff. So it's not a massive. It's a big leap to get ready in 10 days for an international match. It is very difficult to do. You always hear me. I'm sure you're bored to hear me say, get the kicking, get the defence right to start in the set. If you can get the set piece right, then it's a really good start to the championship because it's hard to get the attack organised quickly. I'd love to see a Dogbo in this week. He's got now kind of 2.5 weeks to kind of bed in the game plan. He should get a lot of it right, but on the bench he'll probably be perfect because he'll be able to give that impetus into the game, hopefully, and a bit of power. You hope you're going forward, but even if it's in a tight one, he can make a big impact there. So I think this could be a good one for him to come onto the bench for me. Yeah. I think Stockdale will be very lucky to play again. I get Jonathan's point that we didn't get to see the best parts of his game. But the Bielbarré one where he goes, when Bielbarré's down on his knees after the Sam Prendergast tap tackle, to me, he's got to at least touch him. Like, I know he's rapid, but he's down on his knees. Like, you can't just not tackle. I don't know what happened there. I wish I had a wide angle camera to see why he doesn't even lay a glove on him there. But to me, that was just pretty horrific. To not even once he goes down his knees, you got to put him out. You got to at least make him make the pass on the inside. I thought that was bad, to be honest with you. And I hate criticising because he's been great, and I do agree with Jonathan. I'd love to see him with ball in hand, but to me, for a big guy, I didn't think he did enough in the air for me as well. I think, like, yes, we want to see him attacking with the ball, but that was a messy game, and Ireland weren't playing well. He is a big man. I'd like to have seen him being a bit more imposing in the air and go for more catches, rather than kind of tap backs and things like that. So. I think he'd be lucky to stay on the field for me. And And I think that's probably the only change I'd make in the back line. To me, I still think I would go with Byrne at 10, but he's out of the picture, and I don't think that's realistic. But if you're asking me, he's the guy I'd have picked. I thought Crowley was good when he came on the pitch, by the way.
Yeah,
but I just
want a Prendergast. Jonathan, myself, I discussed it with Luke on Friday. I want a Prendergast 10, Crowley 15. I feel like the best attack I've seen from Irish teams in the last couple of months was La Rochelle in the second half when Prendergast and Byrne were both on the pitch, and they dovetailed really well for those 2 tries that Leinster ended up winning the game by. And I thought in the second half, now obviously you can say France had took the foot off the pedal and stuff like that, but I still thought the 2 playmakers did look good, and I'd like to see it this weekend. And then with the view to Twickenham, okay, if we see it this weekend, then it looks really, really good again. And we're like, okay, do we bring that to Twickenham? Or if it doesn't look good, we say, okay, no, we tried it, it didn't look good, it didn't work, but we'll go to Twickenham and we'll pick Jamie Osborne, who's maybe more robust in the air. England are obviously very good in the air, so it'll be a big ask for Crowley. But like, I like the idea of experimenting with that this weekend.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting in Farrell's post-match presser with the Irish media that he sort of pushed back on that idea that Ireland would look better with the 2 playmakers, that it I don't know whether it was him sticking up for Osborne or whether it was his genuinely held belief that the game had broken up to a point that it wasn't a fair comparison. But I thought that was interesting. I think whenever you look at, I suppose, what was being asked of Osborne, and I don't think we should understate that because he hadn't played since November, I think it would be fairly harsh to bomb him out of the team off the back of his first game back since the autumn. Look, I'm interested, like, with the left wing, like, who would you bring in?
I really don't know. I'm really stuck on that one.
It's low, isn't it? If you're dropping Stockdale,
it's what?
It's low.
It probably is low, but like I don't think Lowe's been playing great this season. So I mean, I'm caught on that one, John. I just thought that tackle on Bielbarri was he's got to make that tackle on him. I know he's really quick. I'm not underestimating the difficulty of it, but he went down his knees from the tap tackle. Like, there's no way he should be gassing you once he's gone down his knees. Do you know what I mean? Now, as I said, I'd like to have an aerial view of it so I could see, like, Stockdale might have been miles off, but there's an issue with that too as well, if you're asking me, because your spidey sense has got to be up. You got to be, when you see that, you got to go, okay, where's the threat? And as the backfield guy, if I have to leave a big gap on the other side, I've got to stop this kind of danger that's kind of developing on this side and just really hot tail it across the pitch, to the space that I've left. But you got to deal with the threat that's in front of you first of all. And I think he's either not too close there, or he's just not. He's just not a good defender still. One or the other, which is really harsh thing to say. But to me, I would be gutted if I didn't even lay a glove on him. I know he's rapid. It'll sound really harsh because it's Bielbarri, but he's got to tackle him, I think, there, to be honest. So it's harsh. I just didn't think he was good enough in the air either for a big man. I thought he should have done a bit better. And I agree. I wish there was an obvious selection there on that left wing slot. But let's remember, Lowe has
left wingers weren't in the squad. The 2 form left wingers in Ireland weren't in the squad, and Kenny and Ward. So I think that's where it gets interesting because I would.
But Lowe's a lion as well, and I think from the
he's not having a good season. He wasn't good in the lines either.
No, but he's still a lion, guys. He's still a class. He's still a quality operator. I'd like to see. To me, I'd be leaning towards giving Lowe the opportunity. Look, if he doesn't have a good day out, then you kind of say, well, now we're back to But Stockdale to me didn't look like the answer on the weekend either, and he just still struggles a little bit on the defensive side for me. So it seems harsh. I feel like I'm always having a go at Stockdale, but I was disappointed with that. I was hoping it would go well for him, to be honest with you.
Joe McCarthy gets to stay in the team despite giving away that shocking penalty. Yeah, but Stockdale's being booed at the touch.
Well, it was a bad missed tackle.
I know you sort of got tongue in cheek there, Will, but I think it is an interesting point because I would wonder about the messaging of if you come out and say what Farrell said, and we've already talked about it, but if you come out and say that your team has a lack of intent and your instant reaction is to undo the most dramatic change that you made coming into that game, which was to drop James Lowe, bring in James Ryan and Jack Conan, then all you're really doing is continuing to trust that same group of players to play themselves into form. And I think we're beyond the point of thinking that that's going to happen because they've been below the level that they were at for so long. So that's why I think this is a really interesting team selection for Farrell. And I know Cian wrote a piece about it during the week about how this was probably Farrell's most important selection. And I think there is merit in that because I suppose to take the team that we're talking about there, like if that was the team, I think a lot of people would be very disappointed because if you're looking for a reaction, you haven't really changed anything. You're still just relying on the same sort of group of 18, 19 core players. And, if Timony isn't the one that comes into the back row, having been the best player in Paris, I would wonder what message that sends. I agree 100%. But look, I thought that Conan would start at 6, and I thought ahead of Prendergast. I was surprised whenever that didn't happen. And if that wasn't going to happen, then I thought it would Burn at 6 and Ryan in the second row.
It's also very curious as to, after saying that intent comment, who takes the fall,
Yeah.
Like whoever takes the fall is basically him saying it was you and you and you and you, or however many changes he makes. Like he might frame it, I'm sure he would frame it a completely different way, but in reality, that's what he's saying. In some ways, that's what he's saying. Like, as in, we didn't have the requisite mindset, mentality, desire, fight, heart, intent, and I'm making you guys the scapegoats. Or not the scapegoats, I'm blaming you, and I'm saying you got...
At some point, so yeah, look, that I think that's fun, but the accountability is a big thing as well, so, at some point, you got to upset a few people to...
That's why McCarthy, I think...
Yeah, no, and sorry, I'm actually sorry, I hope I'm not, to me, he feels like a really important part of the puzzle for me. I'd rather bring him along. I think the bench will hurt enough for him. I still think he was outstanding on the Lions as well. Like he's top quality.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in that. I think a rap on the knuckles, maybe a bench slot, perhaps, would be enough for me. But I still think I'd rather rap on the knuckles and keep him in the team and say, I'm watching you like a hawk this week. You need to be focused for however long you're on that pitch about not giving away soft ones, And he's got to realise, he's got to have a feel for the game. That's the thing about McCarthy, is that he's competing so hard all the time, but sometimes I think he loses the feel. And Doris, to a certain extent, Byrne has it at times as well. They're such competitors that sometimes, the best players have a feel for when to just lay off a little bit. Doris is probably the best of all three at doing it, because I think sometimes he gets away with stuff he shouldn't get away with. But, he's looking at the ref, he puts a hand on it, he's just delaying a half a second. I think he gets the value of a half a second of a delay for the attack, whereas I think the other guys don't sometimes. I think they're like all in, and, if I'm there, that's it. I'm in there, I'm hanging tough. And I think, there's something in that for McCarthy. He needs to realise there's times where, you need to, the team, the other team are going to have the ball. That's okay, or it's going to be a half a second, not a second delay, and he's got to feel that. So
how many lessons? How many kind of lessons do you learn? How many chances do you get before you should have 45 minutes on the bench to think about what you've done, basically?
Yeah, but what's the net for with him? I think to me he's still net positive in the team.
But by putting him on the bench for a week, making him really think about it. Because, they
have to win the game.
No,
and he gives you the best chance to win the game.
You're playing Italy, and he's going to play 35 minutes. But, if you're saying, Joe, that's a terrible penalty, how could you give that penalty away? We're picking you again. He's probably like, look, I know it's a bad penalty, Andy, of course. But, whereas it's like, Joe, it was a terrible penalty. You're not starting this weekend.
Why don't you say you're dropped the next time?
Well, I'm
sure. He hasn't been dropped yet. So maybe you say, you've got this is a huge game for you, buddy.
Or would you not have said that?
Yeah, why wouldn't you have said that already? Yeah,
it
should have been said to him already, that kind of thing.
Where would it have been said to him?
The France penalty last year was very costly.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure he was the sole problem that day. They got fairly opened up, pretty bad. I'm like, that was one of the problems, but not like, to me, when you're playing against France, you need his physicality. We're kind of caught. I know we're saying we need to develop depth.
One to drop him for. Sorry, to send the message against Italy. It's not England. I agree. If we were going to Twickenham, I probably would have to be like, okay, you're starting them come up May, because you need to match up with their power. Against Italy, you can get away with putting him on the bench and bringing him off the bench, and it'll send a message as well, I think.
To me, I think that's a bad attitude to take into this week. I think they need to go to absolutely muller these guys. I think they need to go, they need to set out their stall early and put a score on them and do it ruthlessly. And I would say to him, listen, if you any of that kind of crap in the first half, I'm pulling you off after 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and you'll be on the bench next week or drop completely from the squad. Unacceptable going forward. I don't know. It sounds to me like, if you listen to Conor Murray, I thought that was kind of interesting. He was talking about the kind of, how they kind of what the atmosphere is like, or what the
How the players talk to each
player,
other.
how the players talk to each other, and the kind of the format for that, and it's not really that confrontational. It doesn't sound like in there. This might be the week to be pretty confrontational. It sounds like Andy Farrell's on the warpath. So I think to me, this is the week to do that and say, well, like everyone's questioning you. Everyone thinks you're out of form. No one thinks you're out of any good. All of us lads who are talking about the game are saying they should be dropped here and here, there, and everywhere. Let's show everyone. And let's put in a big performance this week, absolutely ruthless, and let's go into England with a bit of confidence and let's deliver a big one over there. And to me, they have a chance to really change the narrative over the next 2 weeks here. And I don't think these guys are done. I think this team is on the edge, but they can pull this thing back. I'm not down on this team yet. I think they've some. To me, it's quite clear what they need to do in terms of messaging. I do think there's a few changes that could happen, but I don't know if it's wholesale for me yet.
Also a big week, I think, for Caelan Doris, Jonathan. Like if you're talking about Andy Farrell talking about the team's intent, like whose job is it outside of the head coach to set that tone? It's the captain. You know, Johnny Sexton was the captain for so long. Paul O'Connell before him. You know, Brian O'Driscoll as well. Like always have a great feel for the group, and Luke, I'm sure, could speak to that. The great captains do. And Caelan Doris is still very much a new captain. You know, a lot of focus on his interactions with referees. He's returning from a serious shoulder injury, which probably hasn't been talked about as much in terms of his form as well. Like shoulder's a pretty key area for a back row. You know, like it's key for everyone, but you know the amount of times he's putting his body on the line as well. Feel like it's a big championship for him as well. Like he needs to be a 9 out of 10 from his performance. He needs to be a 9 out of 10 with his messaging to referees. He needs to be a 9 out of 10 with how he interacts with the group and how he sets the tone. And if there's a problem with the intent and a problem with how the team pitched up the parse with their mindset, outside of Andy Farrell, he's the first person that needs to answer for that in some ways.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about the viability of this team moving forward, which is essentially what people are talking about, whether it's time to bring a new group through, and if Ireland have done enough to try and bring a new group through over the last number of years. Like you're right, Caelan Doris is as captain, he is the figurehead of this group. Like we hear so much about the collective and so much about leadership groups now and stuff, but like the captain is the face of the team essentially. I think you're 100% in what you say about the shoulder injury. Maybe we haven't given enough leeway for that. Even the mental toll of thinking that you're going to captain the Lions to not going on the Lions, and that's, you know, a career pinnacle. So working your way back from that mentally, I think, is incredibly tough as well. Obviously, I don't see a world in which Ireland, having been loyal selectors or conservative selectors, whatever way you want to put it, I don't see a world in which they drop their captain. I do think that we're probably at a point where we need to reframe how we look at being dropped, because I think we do tend to see it as, you know, your international career is over and there's no way back from them. There's countless examples of how that's not the case. George Ford, obviously, being a primary example of England. Even Josh van der Fly. You know, Josh van der Fly got dropped and then won World Player of the Year. Like, it doesn't have to be a permanent thing. As Luke says, you know, there can still be life in your international career beyond this. But nobody's undroppable, but I would say Caelan Doris is probably as close as you can be.
Yeah, Byrne's pretty undroppable.
Obviously, like dropping your captain to the bench would signal panic. It would like, but I suppose the way I look at it, like what levers can Andy Farrell pull now in this championship? A jolt of like putting Sheehan on the bench, McCarthy on the bench, Van der Fleer on the bench, and saying, you guys are not playing well enough. I don't care that you guys are some of the best players in the world and you just delivered for me in Australia. There's guys in the squad who I think are playing a little bit better. Doris as the captain with the big C, it's probably too much of a PR shitstorm if the team is announced on Thursday and he's not in it. It probably becomes, oh my God, Andy Farrell has dropped his captain. And like, I'm not saying his form is terrible either. I just think Conan is a really good player and I like him at number 8. And Doris, I don't think he's playing his best rugby for maybe the injury is stymieing him. But I don't think that's a realistic option, really, because I just think it would indicate panic too much. But
you know what? I never loved the idea, because I think Conan's been playing brilliant. He's been one of Ireland's best players the last year, I think, when he's been on the pitch, and Leinster's, by the way. I just never liked the idea of restricting his minutes to whatever it is, 30. Whenever you bring the bench on, it never feels right to me. It always feels like I'd rather have him on for 60 great minutes than for 30 great minutes, you know. And people would say, well, it's more effective at the end of the game, and there's an argument to that. But I
think that, you know, I think there was a few big games against La Rochelle where having them both in the back row, they didn't win, and I think that might have scared off the selectors of kind of doing that again, because it was such a big game. Now, I don't think that was why they lost in those two finals, but pretty sure they both were playing. I think it was 6 and 8 in both those games. I think Conan was 8 and Doris was 6 in that instance. I think they got a little spooked potentially after that.
Yeah, and it's do you know what it is? I think you're always scared that, you know, Doris has one of these unbelievable games where he's kind of carrying through people, he's sidestepping people, he's an absolute nightmare to play against. He just seems to break. You know, he's one of those, when he has a big game, you know, he's riding these tackles that he seems to have no right to do. And you're always worried you miss it. You miss a little bit of that if he heads to 7. But I think, you know, he gives you a pretty big, huge pack if you have that back row. You know, you think about your scrum. You want to support those guys at kind of, you know, the relative inexperience at 1 and 3. You want to send out a real physical message. England will pose a massive threat to them, and you know the extra weight could be very good. Could be very valuable there. And Doris is brilliant on the deck. So yeah, I don't know. To me, that's where I'm leaning at the moment. I'm not. I wouldn't be. I'd be making some changes.
You want Byrne, Doris, Conan as your back row.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
with Ryan and McCarthy. There's a lot of size and power there.
There is serious power there, you know. And I think, you know, at home, I just really like the idea of that. I think it really simplifies things. They're all very experienced guys. I think it would give them an opportunity to I think demonstrate how good they are, to play themselves back into a little bit of form. I get Jonathan's point, but I don't think these guys are done yet. I just think it's really difficult after a Lions year to kind of get into form again. It really disrupts the kind of natural flow of the season, and there's been lots of injuries in that. You know, most of those guys have had injuries and different setbacks and things. You know, Byrne is playing in a team that's out of form at the moment, not playing well himself. I'd like to see the big boys out together, put them all out together, put a target on their back and say, listen, I'm ready to make changes. I'll do something drastic against England. I will. You've got a chance this week to show what you're about. And if you do the business for me, we'll head into next week confident over to Twickenham. And I trust my little bit of experience. I think there's enough in this group to get to the World Cup. Is where I'm thinking.
I like the way you're framing it.
Well, it's that
kind of. I'm thinking a burning of the boats. You know the thing? It's like we're burning the boats.
No way back.
Yeah, there's no way back. I'm picking you guys, and you have to deliver or else.
That's
and
it.
then if you deliver it, we're going to Twickenham. And we're, you know,
and no, make a few changes for Twickenham. Like get
I'm kind of amped up now. I've kind of amped up now.
To me, that's a great way to frame, because you'll get I believe you will get a reaction out of these guys. I think there's some absolute world class players in that group, some of the best players in the world who are not playing well. But jolt them into action with something like that. I'm not sure the guys. I really like Timoney, but I just, you know, at international level, it is a big step up. He's been really good for Ulster, and he was pretty good in Paris. I don't know if he was the best player on the pitch for me, but I thought maybe
Ireland's best player. Sorry, not the best player on the pitch, but Ireland's.
Sorry, Ireland's best. Sorry, that's an important distinction. Yeah,
give the man of the match.
That's an important distinction. You're right, Jonathan. Excuse me, but I don't know if he was Ireland's best player in my opinion. I thought actually McCluskey went pretty well, but look, I think I'm not ready to quit here. I think. Some backline changes potentially, but again, I would take the point that Lowe hasn't been playing great, but I just think Stockdale he just didn't do enough for me out there. And then I wonder about the 10 thing. I wonder would they do something there? And I do think, you know, Osborne has a big role this week, because they really look like they're missing Keenan to me. They really are missing him, and they're missing Hansen, and they are missing Lowe. That little bit of ball playing, that little bit of you know, power around the pitch. I think the kicking would have been handy as well. You know, I think they're missing those guys who are, you know, when they're playing well. Problem is, Lowe isn't playing well. The other two are injured. But Keenan opens up the pitch for you. You hear me talking about it all the time, because if you don't have two natural ball players in the middle of the pitch who are kind of pre-contact players, McCluskey's lovely. You know, he has a nice passing game, but he's not going to be putting guys away. You know, that's not what his game is. I think it's more around the offloading and things like that. If you ask me what McCluskey's best at, and Ringrose is just very direct type of player. He's got good hands, but he needs time. I think they need someone. They need a second pair of hands. You think it's obviously to bring Crowley in, but I think Osborne actually has lovely hands and needs to get involved in the play more. And if they bring in Lowe, I think he will add a little bit of that to them too, because he's good at getting involved. And I think he's a guy who's been dropped and might be good to bring back in.
Yeah,
because now he's got that.
He's got the kick up the
He's
arse,
got the jolt. He knows that I was a Lion last summer. What's after happening? And to me, he's got the jolt.
One last thing before we wrap up, just on Timoney, Jonathan, and you kind of touched on this earlier. Like, the reason I would like to see him starting, and why I think it's kind of somewhat important that he gets to start, is because he played so well in Paris, and I think Andy Farrell thinks this way, and I'm probably guilty of it as well. That the reason I'd often say, look, Andy Farrell, there's not players out there that he could be picking. Like, the guys he's picking are the best players. These other guys aren't good enough to play against France. They're not good enough to play against England. And you see Timoney get that opportunity and play well. That's why I would like to see him actually backed, because he proved to me on Thursday that he actually is better than I thought. I didn't think he would be able to kind of in that environment look as eye-catching as he did and look as powerful as he did. It looked like a URC game in some instances for him when he is really muscular and powerful with the ball. So I would like to see him get picked on that basis and kind of maybe show that actually some of these players that perhaps who we have rated and said, oh, maybe they're not good enough in the top arena, give them a chance, and they actually are. That's kind of what
this is the thing, Will, and this is my big sort of, I suppose, thing that I've been thinking about since the France game. It's like, on what basis did we think Timoney wasn't good enough? Because the only basis that we had was that he hadn't been given a chance. At the age of 30, he plays in the Six Nations for the first time, comes off the bench and brings exactly the sort of intent that Andy Farrell said was missing. I think the optics of not starting Timoney this week would be horrendous. I think it would be the messaging around having a player play so well for his province for so long, have to wait so long to get a chance against one of the big boys in international rugby, have him do exactly what you were asking other players to do and they didn't do, and then you still don't pick him. I think it would be the messaging that would send to everybody outside what has come to be viewed as Farrell's preferred options, I think would be terrible.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the Timoney thing. I would rather have. I just still think, I think Conan's better than Timoney, and I think that Doris is better than Timoney. Now, there's probably a more natural fit with Timoney at 7, and I get Jonathan's point.
But you could go Conan at 6 and Doris at 8 and Timoney at 7 then.
But I would rather have Ryan in there. So for me, the biggest impact that we got on the weekend was Ryan on the pitch. When he is on it, like his physicality at the breakdown, I mean, he was a breath of fresh air. You saw, like, when he was, I think, I can't remember who was it, Clarkson maybe carried one, but you saw Ryan on his tail and he just, like, fires him through kind of the France defence close to the line. There was a few of those moments where I just thought, like, when he's playing well, Ryan makes a big difference to him. He's simplified his game over time, I think. He's changed. He's not as effective. When he came on the scene, he had all that kind of bulk and some kind of eye-catching stuff. He's a different player now, but he's super physical. I think he'd really help the back line. I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but I think
quicker ball.
He's a simple player. He does the thing. He does his job really, really well around the pitch. He's fit. He makes loads of tackles, and he's physical in the tackle too. He's really physical in the tackle. I just feel like I'd like to have him in there. I think sometimes Byrne is a great tackler, but he'll kind of hold guys. He's kind of more looking for the ball, whereas Ryan's looking for the hits, if you know what I mean. It's kind of similar to McCarthy to a certain extent. They're kind of hitters. To me, and I'd like to have the two of them there. I think it'd be good for the scrum, and I think it'd be good for the guys around the pitch to have one guy in there who's just kind of chunking through the work, because I think he got the eye-catching guys there. But I will say, I don't have a massive problem with Timoney coming in. I think he's been playing great stuff. I think he's a little bit unproven, and I'm basing my selection of Doris there by trying to get as many of my good players in. Whether that's a natural fit is another question. Timoney's probably the more natural fit.
It's funny, Jonathan's point on optics, like, I've never seen a coach care less about optics than Andy Farrell. Like, he doesn't mind picking like 12 Leinster players in a team. If he cared about optics, long ago he would have pared back a Leinster representation. Like, he picked Thomas Clarkson and Jamie Osborne to go on the lines. It's funny, I was talking to Rudd about that last week, and he said the English journalists were fuming over there, being like, are they bringing over Thomas Clarkson, Leinster's choice tight head? It's like they were not happy campers. So Andy Farrell does not care about optics. That's why I'm so fascinated to see this team selection. I agree, as you said, to allude to Keane's piece earlier, like about his most important team selection. Certainly it will really set the tone for the rest of the championship, and in some ways, as this appears to be a tipping point in this World Cup cycle, it might even set the tone for the next couple of months and potentially all the way up to the World Cup. We're going to have to put a pin in it at some stage, so we'll call it here. Very much enjoyed this week's Left Wing podcast, sponsored by Energy. A big thanks to Luke for joining me in studio. Always good to have Jonathan with us. We will be back. When will we be back with you next? Sinead and Keane and Rudd will be in the Aviva Stadium on Saturday. They will be chatting about Ireland. And then myself and Luke will be back with you next week. So until then, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.